Hello and welcome to the History Crew channel. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel as you will receive notification on important updates in the future. In this presentation, we will be discussing topic 4 of your syllabus, which is civil resistance in South Africa during the 1970s through to the 1980s. This particular video serves as part 3 to the topic. The following video helps us to understand the power and influence of the charismatic, influential leader that was Steve Biko.
If South Africa had been a kinder and more just society in the mid-20th century, Bantu Stephen Biko may have qualified as a medical doctor and served the nation as a healer. That was not the case, and instead he followed his conscience and intellect to fight for equality, democracy and justice as a leader of the Black Consciousness movement. Professor Ashwin Desai has researched the life and times of this iconic figure, and he shared this with us in a recent conversation.
The decade leading up to 1976 saw a simmering sense of defiance come to the boil, while the authorities tried to keep the lid on by using repressive measures and open violence.
We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law.
Bantu Stephen Biko had a clear vision of what the future should hold.
It's almost impossible to pin down the birth of an idea to a specific day or date, but it is safe to say that Black consciousness has been speaking truth to power in South Africa for just over half a century, and that Bantu Stephen Biko led the movement in thought and action. For many South Africans, he is best known as a martyr of the struggle, and little thought is given to the philosophy and politics that he nurtured, fought and died for. It's an aspect of our nation's past and present that deserves closer attention, and that's why I'm meeting a man who knows the story of Black consciousness in South Africa from the inside, and he's Ashwin Desai. Ashwin Desai.
Wow, so great to see you.
Wonderful to see you too. You are the perfect man to be speaking to about this. What are the origins of the Black consciousness movement?
This is where Black consciousness was born, right in the streets of Durban in the late 1960s. It comes at a particular time in our history. The PAC and the ANC were banned. Most of the top leadership were either driven into exile or were incarcerated on Robben Island. And so there's a kind of quietness in resistance politics in South Africa. And Biko comes and sort of sets off a new form of politics, a new form of resistance.
For the benefit of young South Africans who may not know, who was Bantu Stephen Biko and what was his role in the development of Black consciousness?
He grew up in the Eastern Cape, and as a young boy at the age of 16 was detained, beaten and excluded from a very prestigious institution called Lovedale. He then comes to Durban and does his matric in Marion Hill at the monastery. He then leaves the monastery to come to medical school to become a doctor, then starts getting involved in politics and launches the Black consciousness movement. A new hope that the brutal regime of apartheid can be defeated. And in 1969, exactly 50 years ago, Biko became the first president of the South African Student Organization. And so a new phase in liberation history was to begin.
How did the BCM differ from other liberation movements?
They always saw themselves as part of these liberation movements. They're trying to evoke an internal dissent at a time when the liberation movements were banned. That was originally their philosophy. Black consciousness wasn't a movement in that sense as an organizational discipline. It was a mood. It was a feeling. It was a sense of justice. And that began me on a journey of looking through photographs back into Biko and Black consciousness history.
May I see some photos?
Of course. These things move me. Often we want to just romanticize our history about struggle and redemption. But in between, we have to also take cognizance that people paid heavily for the kinds of freedoms that we can enjoy in the present. And there are two photographs, especially of Biko's funeral, who died because of his refusal to be broken. And I see him in a coffin. And suddenly you see the second photograph of Biko's body reflected in the mirror. That's the coffin lid. And I just kept thinking how powerful this is. A lot of people write about the Black consciousness movement as resurrection after the quietism of the banning of the liberation movements. And here, Biko both literally seeming to rise above, but his funeral becomes in many ways a celebration of a life as much as there is anger. Biko speaks. Biko still is present in our lives, but the people who beat him to death will never make history, will never speak to us.
Ashwin, what made Biko so dangerous in the eyes of the apartheid state?
Firstly, he was very clever in the way he conducted himself. He learned from the historical experiences of previous liberation movements. He always said, we are keeping within the confines of the law. We are not opting for violent rebellion. And so every time they tried to pin a charge on him, the last time he was detained, he was in solitary confinement for 115 days, and they would beat him. Then he would come out banned. Then would police him. But they just couldn't pin a charge on him. He was too disciplined in what he wanted. He was also starting to impact in the public domain in ways that the apartheid state just couldn't countenance. He was starting to meet people from all over the world, and people were coming all the way to meet with Biko. And that is why he had to be murdered, for that voice to be stilled in that fashion.
Ashwin, what were the events leading up to the SASO BBC 9 trial, and what were the outcomes?
The initial spurt for it was Frelimo had come to power in Mozambique, and the leaders of SASO and BBC wanted to celebrate a black government coming to power. But in this way, they contravened bannings, and the state started to build a case that this was a group of people involved in the violent overthrow of the apartheid regime. So the SASO BBC 9 are sentenced to Robben Island. Other people are banned. People have run into exile. But there's still one living symbol, Bantu Stephen Biko. Refuses to be broken. He refuses to keep quiet. And so the apartheid regime murders him. And this is the end result, the high and the lowest point of the Black consciousness movement. And for me, just the power, the sense of anger, but the sense of determination at this funeral, the coffin held aloft. We're proud that there's a martyr to the revolution, a man who stared death in the face. And Biko writes about this, that if you want to be involved in struggle, then you have to accept the possibility of death. And then the last photograph is this gravestone, and just those four men around it, the starkness of it. And that's why when I was trying to write this piece, I want to entitle Biko in black and white. In true Biko style, where's my hospitality? So, some tea, as is the Durban way?
Yes, please, Ashwin. What was Biko's vision for post-apartheid South Africa?
That's the mighty question. Biko spoke a lot about what kind of society he wanted. He saw a society in which people weren't judged by their skin color, that there shouldn't be the depths of inequality and poverty in society.
How do you think he would have responded to the current situation in South Africa?
He would have respected what the liberation movements have done and the sacrifices they've made for the new South Africa. He would say we liberated ourselves from the shackles of apartheid, of kind of signs that tell you white and non-white. Yes, we've liberated society, but we don't have freedom.
Would you say that the principles that Biko fought for have been betrayed?
I don't think he would use words like betrayed. He learned enough from post-liberation societies across the world to know that there's no nirvana on the other side. There's no sort of a quick march into the promised land. That every generation sets new tasks. They have new challenges. Mandela and Sobukwe and Winnie Mandela and Albertina Sisulu set tasks with the defeat of apartheid. And that was mission accomplished. And he would have seen this generation as delivering on economic freedoms.
Ashwin, what relevance does Black consciousness have in the present day world?
It has huge relevance because Black consciousness was about building a better society, about humanity, about how do you think about identity. The rainbow nation is over. We're struggling what is going to replace it. Do you want tribalism to replace it, racial nationalism, or completely new, beautiful, flowering identities? In an age where ironically, we should be flowering our identities and boundaries in this global world. Just think about xenophobia, that way we are now labeling people in exactly the ways apartheid labeled people. What is Black consciousness saying? We approach people at the base level of what it is to be human. Imagine yourself beyond being Catholic or Indian or colored or Khoisan or Zulu or white. Just think about yourself at base level. What else can you be that stretch us rather than straitjacket us?
Ashwin, your passion is contagious. Thank you so much for such an insightful afternoon.
Thank you.
It is very easy and very tempting to oversimplify the story of our past and to treat it as if there were only a single true version. Bantu Stephen Biko deserves to be remembered as more than just a martyr, and the best memorial that we can give him is to make his ideas part of our contemporary discourse.
So how did the legend of Steve Biko begin? He was born in King William's Town in the Eastern Cape in 1946. After school he studied medicine at the University of Natal. While he was there he became active in student politics through the National Union of South African Students. However, this union was dominated by white liberals, and in 1968 Biko and other black students broke away to form the South African Students' Organization, a separate union for black students. He believed that blacks should not rely on help from whites, even if they were against apartheid, but should lead their own resistance against the apartheid regime and its oppressive psychological effects on black people. This meant rejecting the non-racialism of the ANC and the Freedom Charter. At first, the apartheid government would not consider this a threat to them, which was in line with their policy of separate development. What Steve Biko is essentially saying is that black people need to uplift themselves first before true racial integration could be achieved in South Africa. They will also be refusing to accept any help from whites because whites could never fully understand the problems the black people faced. During the 1970s, majority of white people would not have even been into the townships and would have no idea as to how the majority of their countrymen lived. It was very important to the black consciousness activist that black people liberate and uplift themselves by themselves. Biko believed that blacks in South Africa needed to free themselves from the psychological state of being treated as inferior after centuries of colonialism and apartheid. He also believed that once blacks had liberated themselves in this way, and gained psychological, physical and political power, then non-racial organizations would be able to operate properly. Biko believed that all those classified as non-white by the apartheid government, which included Indians and coloreds, should see themselves as black, and that this would be the first step towards their liberation. This is how the term black was adopted, as a direct challenge to the apartheid classification of them as non-white. However, he did not see black consciousness as black racism, and did not call for revenge on white society. He saw it instead as a means of creating a sense of solidarity and pride in black South Africans. So why is there so much emphasis on Steve Biko? It is commonly accepted by many that Steve Biko, who was elected as the first president of the South African Students' Organization, was the natural leader and spearhead of the black consciousness movement in South Africa. His words, thoughts and actions made him very popular amongst his people, who may have regarded him as the new Messiah in the liberation struggle. Thank you for watching this video, and as always, please remember to subscribe to the History Crew channel. At SASO's inaugural conference in 1968, it was decided that the main aim was to conscientize black communities and instill in them self-confidence and self-pride to effectively resist white rule. SASO began to actively spread BC across all campuses, by working within existing SRC structures to communicate with the different BC groups. SASO played a very important role in the liberation role by promoting black unity, making black students more politically aware and encouraging them to mobilize by taking action against apartheid. Thus, SASO played a huge role in the liberation struggle by promoting black unity and solidarity, by making black students more politically aware and by encouraging black students to free themselves from apartheid. SASO became a powerful force because a new breed of students were born and who were willing to challenge the apartheid regime without fear. These new freedom fighters knew that there was great risk and great danger, but they were never going to back down. Thank you for watching, and as always, please remember to subscribe to the channel and share this with others.